Hi, I am Vitold, and after having made a fairly raw video on the 10 main differences between the new BMW R1300 GS and the previous R1250 GS that has been with us for quite some time without being transformed from a 1200 GS, now it's time for me to give you a very straightforward and open comparison of the 1250 and 1300. In this video, I'll tell you what these two feel like in comparison with each other. Now, there is some new tech in R1300 GS, a new style, and we already know that, but what really matters is what emotions and experiences we get when riding each of them. What you need to know up front is that I'm running this independent YouTube channel, having, let's call it, unorthodox approach. For example, calling my reviews honest reviews, as there is no external influence on me and I do not own any of those two adventure motorcycles. So I'm unbiased and can openly express my observations and feelings about them. And that's what I'm going to do now after riding all big and mid-sized adventure motorcycles that are on the market. Just the new BMW F900 GS has been launched and not tested by me, but they are not available anywhere at the time of making this video. At the time of publishing it, I might have been after seeing it. I'll be doing my best to describe why I like some things the way that they are, so that it's absolutely clear to you guys. Let's start with the engine and performance, where I let myself to comment on that topic in my previous video with the main 10 differences between the two, so I'll keep it brief here. The new R1300 GS has more displacement, there is more power and more torque. These are a few percent differences in comparison to the R1250 GS that, if you really care about this whole topic, this can further diminish by giving the 1250 an aftermarket exhaust and letting it breathe better. Then the difference will be even smaller. In general, I don't feel much of a difference in raw performance or where the power and torque are located in the power and torque curve on a RPM range. I am aware that probably in laboratory testing the 1300 would give us more, and I do like that direction. It's a good direction, I think. Where the difference is the dynamic mode, where in the new GS there is much more aggression, much more violence and liberty in terms of safety systems. So you will feel the punch quicker. And all in all, in my books, the 1300 wins here very slightly, for example, because of that. However, in everyday riding, even aggressive riding, they're pretty much the same to me. In the second area of this comparison, I'll go straight to seat and position comfort. I happened to have a lowered seat on the R1300 GS, but have also had an opportunity to sit on a regular one with the seat at the standard height, so 85 centimeters instead of 83 centimeters with a lowered seat. For the record, I am 1 meter 83 centimeters tall, or 6 feet tall. On the new GS, even that lowered seat feels quite comfortable, despite appearing as hard at first when just pushing down on it with a finger or a hand. Don't get discouraged, but then sitting on it, thanks to its shape, it is surprisingly neutral and fine overall. On the previous GS, I wish the seat was softer, so here the new R1300 GS wins for me. Now, as for position on a bike, there is one non-standard thing to take into account that turns out to be a key difference to me. It's perception of a motorcycle that you ride. The new GS is visibly smaller, it is narrower and in general lower in many points of its body. Some may say that it's less intimidating, and to me that's true as well. It's not a road cruiser by appearance anymore, but a sleek bike, well, like many others. It feels more like you sit on it rather than in it, as opposed to the 1250, that you're sort of covered by more stuff around you. On the new one, I feel that the handlebar is in a similar position, maybe just slightly lower or further away, but I'm not even sure about that, as it's just so close, so similar. In both bikes, the bars are really wide, but the main difference is in foot pegs location. For me, that's even more dramatic with the 2 centimeter lower seat that I don't exactly enjoy, but I double checked with others, and it seems that we all agree that the knee angle on the new GS seems to be less relaxed, and you've got to squat a little bit more, which to me is considered to be less comfortable. You may get an Enduro Package Pro option and get the height adjustable foot pegs and brake and gear lever, but it's not clear if they may be then further lowered. So in a standard bike, in terms of sitting position, to me, it's better on an R1250 GS. And in terms of perception of a motorcycle, I actually prefer the feeling of steering a massive motorcycle, a massive yacht, which in this case is also the 1250 GS. It gives me a feeling of more power and more confidence, while both have seats at the same height and the upper body position is super similar, if not the same. Considering that we may replace or modify a seat, overall the 1250 wins here to me in the seat and position comfort category. And it directly connects with the super important area of handling at low and high speeds, where a lot of thinking, confusion and wondering happens nowadays, and it also applies to me as well. Now, first of all, BMW R1250 GS has been, in my opinion, the best handling motorcycle in the entire segment, both at high and low speeds. The new R1300 GS handles very similarly, and it is possible that if we were to again put it in a lap, it would do a very tiny bit better. But there is that psychological aspect of how we perceive a motorcycle that we ride, and it's possible that because of this and different expectations towards a now smaller, slimmer, narrower and generally more compact motorcycle, so R1300 GS. Now, because of this, the 1250 actually makes a bigger impression. It certainly does to me, and I really get more and more convinced that either it's just better than 1250 or it's just that psychological aspect that stuns you when starting to move this huge machine, and it turns out that it's so easy and eager to handle that it's just blowing my mind. With the 1300 you perhaps expected more, so it doesn't surprise you as positively as on the 1250. In the end of the day, 1250 actually wins for me here, and if I were to choose a motorcycle to ride on a twisty mountain road or filter traffic in the city, so both first higher and then lower speed scenarios, I would prefer to be on a 1250, and I'm shocked myself by that, but I really cannot put it the other way, no matter what, as it gives me visibly more confidence when riding in comparison to the 1300. It is not a night and day difference, and I don't actually still believe that it's only handling itself, but after all, it just feels nicer to me somehow. It feels like I just enjoy it more. I don't know how to explain that further. And I've also seen some other reviews from more and some less independent people and organizations saying very different things between each other about it, while now you know my perception after riding them all and having no business in praising the new one or the older one. Actually, I might be having more business in praising the new one rather than the old one. Now, about the suspension, this is where the names of the front and rear suspension have changed from Telelever in the front to Telelever Evo, and in the rear from Paralever to Paralever Evo. Yet the suspension travel remains unchanged, for example. In reality, to me, in two main suspension modes, so road and dynamic, next to the third one, which would be enduro. Now there is, in my opinion, a large difference between these modes in the 1300. In the 1250, I couldn't really tell that there is so much going on after switching, so much different stuff going on after switching from one to another mode, while here I definitely do. Now it sits in my mind that in the more, in general, comfortable mode, so road, the 1300 might be a little bit stiffer on some smaller bumps. But if there's indeed a difference in this direction, it's not that obvious to me, and this would not be a deciding factor at all. If you sometimes ride on perfectly flat roads and like to have the suspension more sort of connected, more dense, now the dynamic mode can give you, in my opinion, more in the 1300 rather than in the 1250. In road mode, I think they are very similar, but I feel that the new 1300 should get a win from me here, mostly because of that visible distinction between the modes. It also definitely wins in terms of wind protection, with that optional electrically adjustable windscreen that, along with the side deflectors, does a pretty good job, and I feel that this is a strong win for the new R1300 GS. Adjustment is much more pleasant than just, slowly twisting the knob and always starting the wrong way, by the way. Now, the next category of the comparison are brakes, and here BMW have made the brake discs slightly larger on the new R1300 GS, but they also did two more things that may be more noticeable than that. which is mostly noticeable on paper. First of all, now the brakes may be linked or integrated, which I mentioned in my video about the differences. Now, braking power, the ease of dosing seem the same to me, and both are absolutely amazing, while there's pretty much no front suspension dive in either, and that is fantastic. However, again, the feeling of braking a mighty 1250 huge wardrobe on two wheels with such an ease impresses me psychologically perhaps more than the 1300, for which it's sort of expected. Well, that's interesting, right? But the other difference is that no matter which example of R1250 GS you would buy, you would get the best brakes it could have. But if you buy R1300 GS, you will have to pay extra for a better so-called sport brake option with red BMW text on them. If you don't pay for that option, which is included in the dynamic package by the way, so you will need to get the whole pack, you're clearly screwed. I don't know how to comment on it in terms of comparison, because I haven't tried the butt brakes, so I'll just leave this point as it is with no winners, let's say. In laboratory, likely the 1300 could win thanks to its lower weight, provided that nothing has been even enhanced in the brakes, while we know they are a little bit bigger. Otherwise, I cannot tell which one feels better to me. Both feel fantastic. Still applies to the 1300 with good brakes, with the sport brake option. What we know for sure is that our 1300 GS can have 1 liter of fuel less in its fuel tank as maximum, as it's got 19 liters capacity versus 1250's 20 liters. Fuel consumption would be necessary to fully judge, and I don't have such real-world tests in identical conditions done, so I'm leaving it at that. Yet the new one has a flat storage compartment with a USB-A socket there, which is always something, and 1250 doesn't have it on top of the fuel tank. I wish it had an option of locking when the bike is getting locked itself or having wireless charging, but we're clearly not there yet. In the next category, so weight, we know that the new R1300 GS is lighter by 12 kilograms in its base version with fuel when compared to the outgoing 1250 GS. That's a lot on paper. Some may even use that weight to enhance their bicep strength. And even though I don't feel a clear difference when moving them around, the new one has to win, as it's simply a good direction. Where it truly shines is technology, with some new systems and some old ones that may be harder to operate on the other hand in the new bike. In the 1300 you can now have adaptive cruise control or active cruise control with collision warning and sort of braking, helping you to start braking earlier, especially if you don't have the good brakes. That's all thanks to the front radar. There's also blind spot monitoring in the rear, thanks to another radar that is mounted there. There's also that electrically adjustable windscreen and a new for BMW vehicle ride height control system that is optional and that allows the bike to lower itself by 3 centimeters when coming to a stop. It can also bring itself down after opening a stand and raise itself back up when opening a center stand, which is really cool. You can also lock it in the top position and just disregard it. The displays are pretty much the same, with the new 1300 having one optional set of different gauges that are called Sport. Lots of sport here, just like with an optional sport suspension that allows for 2 centimeter larger spring travel, whatever that spring travel exactly means. It's also said to be stiffer, keep that in mind. Operating some of the new and old functions is different now in the 1300. Some dedicated buttons, for example, to suspension and to heated grips are now gone, and instead there is a new quick menu and 2 more buttons that allow you to travel through that menu and select options. Now, to me that's less intuitive, but then we don't know what it would be like if we had all those new functions in the older 1250, and so the new one wins in that area of tech to me, without much doubt actually. Functions like heel hold, keyless ignition, cornering front LED light, cornering ABS, traction control, riding mode and other stuff are still here in both, so nothing is lost. Now in terms of sound, I am sad to report that there seems to be no upgrade, and both sound terribly, and even factory fitted Akrapovic in the 1300 sounds really bad to me and could just as well be what other manufacturers would call a fully stock exhaust, so don't bother buying it. I think it looks nice and that's its biggest advantages. Perhaps there are some power gains, I do not know that exactly, likely there should be. In the design category, this is super personal and now divides people so much. with this new GS. To me, this is something that I would call a revolution in style. The sideline is quite similar, and I like that, as you can still, I think, tell that this should be a big GS, but from other angles, I personally am not that huge of a fan of this change. From a Mercedes G-Class, it has become sort of a GLE class to me. 1250 looks weird with its asymmetrical front light. The 1300 looks super weird with that bulky forehead that pushed the front light down, making it look like a hunchback from Notre Dame or a mutant goose. In terms of a sleek, smooth, gentle, and sort of I now blend in style of the new R1300 versus the bulky Robocop-like in your face, I am the boss style of the previous R1250 GS. The old one appeals to me more. Yep, I'm one of those despite not even owning a GS. It sometimes happens, and according to my taste, I prefer, for example, the design of older versions of cars like BMW 7 Series, Audi Q7, Cadillac Escalator, BMW 5 Series. Maybe you do too. It's a matter of taste, and some of you like the old one more, some like the new one more, and that's fine. However, if you're one of those that prefer the old one, definitely do let me know in the comments. If you prefer the new one, also share that with us so we can have a little bit of an argument there. I wondered if I should assess the X factor of the both motorcycles like I do in my other comparisons, but in terms of a GS, that would be about its handling mostly and image in the first place, in my case at least. And since I prefer handling and image of the 1250, well, you know, this starts to go in a strange direction. So instead, I'll mention some things that I like here or there more. Firstly, the ignition switch being moved from the middle of the handlebar setup to the right handlebar in the new is, well, to me that's less fun of a solution in the new bike. I somehow liked the nice and sturdy big button on the 1250. Then on the 1300, the passenger seat now moves easily slightly up and back or down and forward without any tools. It's a nice solution, very nice. Also, new central locking system of the all three panniers, the top case and side panniers, is a very cool upgrade. There's also a foldable part of a center stand that you can get out of the way if you don't want it sticking out in the new bike. That's great. Front indicators in the handguards look very nice to me. I like that. They are strong in terms of visibility. Now in the rear, there's one thing that I like more in the 1250 then, which is an addition of a tail lamp. Aside the brake lights already there, being incorporated into the indicators. Now there's a radar in the new one. The rear of the 1300 looks kind of empty to me because of that, but not that big of a deal. The new one has got this nice tank cover that seems to be some kind of a rubbery material that's scratch resistant. And well, all right. So it appears that the new R1300 GS can be better in many places. That's the goal of launching a successor. Now this time BMW took a lot of risks in terms of style and design. And well, to me, the old R1250 GS looks tougher, more manly, raw, and in the end, to me, that is cooler. The new somehow feels stiffer overall. When dealing with it, it's more like a now regular motorcycle rather than a very individual, original 1250, which I like in the 1250. Perhaps if there would be an adventure version coming with a larger tank, some overall rougher design here and there, BMW would create a sort of a very separate model out of it that would resemble the 1250 and all previous GSs more. And this way, they could make it, I think, work very well. I believe that it would be a great strategic decision and pretty easy thing to implement at the same time. But then, what about that sport suspension that's already on the list of options now in the regular GS? No one seems to know exactly. I hope adventure still comes, as the name is strong too. But if they choose a direction of closing the gap between a GS and rather a more sporty XR, it may become an M1300 GS instead. Who knows after what we already got now. We will see, and I'm curious myself. Right now, between the two, I prefer the more secure plush overall and confident feeling that I get on the outgoing R1250 GS, while the new tech on R1300 GS is super cool. It is fun and it works mostly as intended. You can see more on that in my full honest review of it. A comparison video with other top adventure motorcycles, it's coming, so subscribe and see you there.